The darkness of space stretched endlessly before the research vessel Horizon's Edge. Captain Deho stood on the bridge watching the stars drift past the viewport. His crew had been traveling for 3 months, mapping unexplored systems in the outer regions of human territory. It was boring work, but someone had to do it. "Captain, we're approaching the Kepler 442 system," said Ji-Wan, the young communications officer. She was barely 23, fresh from the academy, but she had sharp eyes that caught details others missed. "Sensors are picking up something strange." Deho walked over to her station. "What kind of strange?" "Heat signatures. Lots of them. But they're fading fast, like fires burning out." Ji-Wan's fingers danced across her console, pulling up data streams. "Sir, this system was supposed to be inhabited. The Thalian civilization. Population records showed about 4 billion. Dr. Minji emerged from the research lab, her white coat wrinkled from long hours of work. She was the ship's chief scientist, specializing in alien life forms. In her 15 years of service, she had cataloged dozens of new species, but she had never made contact with an intelligent civilization. "Did you say Thalian?" "I've read about them. Peaceful species. Artists and philosophers mostly." "Get us closer," Deho ordered. "But keep shields up and weapons ready." The Horizon's Edge moved deeper into the system. As they approached the third planet, the crew fell silent. The world below was burning. Cities that had stood for thousands of years were now smoking craters. Orbital stations drifted as dead metal husks. The oceans reflected the orange glow of atmospheric fires. "Dear God," whispered Hyok, the second in command. He was older than Deho, a man who had seen combat during the Mars Rebellion 20 years ago. "What happened here?" "Scanning for survivors," Ji-Wan said, her voice shaking. The screen showed nothing but death. No life signs, no emergency broadcasts, just silence and ash. Deho felt his stomach tighten. Humanity had been alone in the galaxy for so long that they forgot others might not be friendly. "Launch recovery drones. Search for any data logs or black boxes. We need to know what did this." The drones descended through the burning atmosphere. For hours they searched through the rubble. Finally, one drone detected a faint power signature in what had been a medical facility. Dr. Minji suited up and took a shuttle down to the surface. The air was thick with smoke and chemicals. Minji's suit filtered out the poison, but she could still smell death through the recycled oxygen. She found the source of the signal in a collapsed building. A single Thalian lay trapped under debris, barely alive. The alien looked almost human, with blue-gray skin and large dark eyes. Its chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. Minji knelt beside it and activated her medical scanner. The injuries were fatal. She had minutes at most. "I'm sorry," Minji whispered. "I'm so sorry we didn't get here sooner." The Thalian's hand reached out and grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. Its mouth opened and sounds came out that Minji's translator struggled to process. Finally, words formed. They came from the deep dark. "The Valtrine. They take everything. Leave nothing. Who are the Valtrine?" Minji asked urgently. "Why did they attack you?" "Because we exist. That is enough reason for them." The Thalian's eyes began to glaze over. "They are coming, consuming. World after world. You must run, hide, or you will burn like us." The alien's hand fell away. Its chest stopped moving. Minji closed its eyes and stood up, her hands trembling. She activated her communicator. "Captain, you need to hear this." Back on the ship, the crew listened to the recording in stunned silence. Dr. Minji played it 3 times, and each time the words felt heavier. The Valtrine, a name that meant nothing to humanity, but clearly meant death to the Thalians. Could this be an isolated incident? Hyok suggested. Maybe a rogue faction or pirates? Ji-Wan shook her head. She had been analyzing the weapon signatures left on the planet's surface. "No, sir, this was coordinated. Military precision. At least 40 capital ships, maybe more. They bombarded every major city simultaneously. This wasn't random violence. This was extermination." Deho looked at the data scrolling across the screens. "If they have that kind of firepower, why haven't we heard of them before?" "Because we're on the edge of explored space," Minji explained. She pulled up a star map. Humanity has only expanded about 50 light-years from Earth. The galaxy is huge. There could be entire empires out there we know nothing about. "We need to report this to Earth immediately," Hyuk said. "Agreed." Deho turned to Ji-Wan. "Send a quantum burst transmission to Fleet Command. Include everything we've found. Make it priority alpha. Jiwan's fingers froze over her console. Captain, I'm picking up something else. What now? Remember those heat signatures we detected when we first arrived? I've been analyzing the decay patterns. They're not random. They form a path. She brought up a three-dimensional map showing the trajectory of the attacking fleet. The Valtrine came from that direction, attacked here, and then continued on this vector. Daiho felt cold dread settling into his bones. Where does that vector lead? Jiwan calculated the trajectory, cross-referencing it with stellar cartography data. The answer appeared on the screen and the bridge fell silent. Human space, she whispered. That path leads directly toward our colonies. Dr. Minji checked the calculations twice. She's right. If they maintain their current course and speed, they'll reach our outer settlements in approximately 6 months. Eok slammed his fist on the console. 6 months? That's not enough time to prepare any kind of defense. We don't even know what we're defending against, Daiho said, forcing himself to stay calm. All we know is that they destroyed an entire civilization. We need more information. I can help with that, Minji said. She had been studying the Thalian data cores recovered by the drones. The Thalians kept extensive records. It'll take time to translate, but I might be able to find out more about these Valtrine. For the next 72 hours, Minji barely slept. She worked through the Thalian archives, piecing together fragments of information. What she found made her blood run cold. The Valtrine Empire had existed for over 10,000 years. They controlled thousands of star systems. They were not conquerors in the traditional sense. They were harvesters. When they found a world with resources, they took everything. The people, the minerals, the water, even the atmosphere. They left nothing but dead rocks floating in space. The Thalians had known about them for decades. They had tried to hide, tried to make themselves small and insignificant. But the Valtrine found them anyway. They always did. Minji presented her findings to the captain. They've destroyed over 200 civilizations that we know of. Maybe more. They see other species as resources, nothing more. Can they be reasoned with? Daiho asked, though he already knew the answer. The Thalians tried. They offered tribute, offered to surrender peacefully. The Valtrine killed them anyway. Negotiation isn't in their nature. Jiwan had been running probability simulations. Captain, based on their attack patterns and fleet strength, if they reach Earth. She couldn't finish the sentence. We'll be extinct, Daiho finished for her. He stood up and looked at his crew. They were scared. He was scared too. But fear was a luxury they couldn't afford. Change of plans. We're not going home yet. We're going to track this fleet and gather as much intelligence as possible. That's suicide, Hyuk protested. Maybe, but Earth needs to know exactly what's coming. We need ship counts, weapon capabilities, tactics. We need everything. Daiho's voice was firm. Set a course to shadow the Valtrine fleet. Stay at maximum sensor range. And G1, send another message to Fleet Command. Tell them we were wrong about the 6 months. How long do we really have? She asked. Daiho looked at the burning world on the view screen. Tell them to prepare for war, because ready or not, it's coming. The horizon's edge turned away from the dead world and headed into the darkness, following the trail of destruction left by an enemy humanity had never known existed. Behind them, the fires of the Thalian civilization slowly died, leaving nothing but cold ash and a warning that might come too late. The emergency session of the United Earth Government had been going for 16 hours straight. In the massive assembly hall in Geneva, representatives from every colony and nation argued while Captain Daiho's report played on screens around the chamber. The images of the burning Thalian world made some people cry. Others sat in angry silence. Admiral Soman stood at the podium waiting for the chaos to quiet down. She was only 38, the youngest person to ever reach her rank, and she had gotten there by being smarter and tougher than everyone else. Her black uniform was crisp despite the long hours. Her eyes were sharp and tired. We need to make a decision, she said, her voice cutting through the noise. The Valtrine fleet will be here in 6 months. Maybe less. Counselor Tajin stood up from his seat. He was an older man with gray hair and kind eyes. He had spent his career working for peace between the Mars colonies and Earth. Admiral, with respect, we don't know if they're even coming here. Captain Daiho's report is based on projections and guesswork. The projections are based on solid data, Soman replied. The Valtrine follow predictable patterns. They harvest one system, then move to the next. We're next on the line. Then we should try to communicate with them, Taijin insisted. Every conflict can be resolved through dialogue. We just need to find common ground. Another counselor laughed bitterly. Common ground? Counselor, these creatures killed 4 billion people. They don't want to talk. They want to consume. The arguing started again, louder than before. Someone closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She had known this would happen. Politicians always wanted to talk when action was needed. But she also understood their fear. Humanity had never faced anything like this. A message appeared on Soman's tablet. It was from Dr. Minji aboard the Horizon's Edge. The scientist had made contact with something calling itself the Remnants. Soman read quickly, then held up her hand. Everyone, please. We have new information. The chamber fell silent. Dr. Minji has established communication with survivors from other civilizations destroyed by the Valtrine. They call themselves the Remnants. They want to speak with us. The main screen flickered and changed. A collection of alien faces appeared, each one different from the last. Some looked like insects, others like plants, and others were completely impossible to describe. But all of them looked scared and tired. One of them spoke, its words translated into dozens of human languages simultaneously. We are the Remnants. We are all that remains of civilizations that once numbered in the billions. The Valtrine destroyed our worlds. We survived by hiding, by running, by becoming so small and quiet that we were not worth hunting. How many of you are there? Someone asked. Thousands of individual survivors. We hide in asteroid fields, in dead systems, in the spaces between stars. We call ourselves Whispers because that is all we are now. Background noise that the Valtrine ignore. Counselor Tajin leaned forward. Can you tell us how to negotiate with them? Surely there must be some way to avoid conflict. The Remnants made sounds that the translators couldn't process at first. Then one word came through clearly. No. Another alien spoke up, its voice heavy with sadness. We tried everything. We offered tribute. We offered technology. We offered ourselves as slaves. The Valtrine took it all and killed us anyway. They do not negotiate. They do not show mercy. They simply take until nothing remains. How many civilizations have they destroyed? Salman asked. Over 200 that we know of. Perhaps more. They have ruled this sector of the galaxy for 10,000 years. In all that time, no one has successfully resisted them. The chamber erupted in panic. People shouted, some cried. Others demanded immediate evacuation of Earth. Salman let them yell for a moment, then slammed her fist on the podium hard enough to make the microphone crackle. Enough. Her voice echoed through the hall. Yes, the situation is bad. Yes, we're facing an enemy that has never been beaten. But giving up is not an option. What choice do we have? Someone shouted back. You heard them. No one has ever won. Soman smiled, and it was not a friendly expression. No one has ever been human before. She pulled up a presentation she had prepared. The Remnants shared tactical data with us. I've spent the last week analyzing Valtrine combat patterns with our best military strategists. They're powerful, yes. They have numbers and experience. But they have one critical weakness, Victor. What's that? Tajin asked. They're predictable. For 10,000 years, they've fought the same way because no one has ever forced them to adapt. Their tactics are based on overwhelming force and traditional military doctrine. They expect enemies to line up and fight them head-on. A younger counselor stood up. So we don't fight them head-on? Exactly. We fight like humans. We use guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run attacks, psychological warfare. We make them bleed for every light year of space they take. We make them pay a price they've never had to pay before. The Remnant spoke again. You don't understand. We thought the same thing. Every civilization thinks they will be the exception. But the Valtrine always win. Always, you should run while you still can. Dr. Minji's voice came through the speakers. With respect, you're wrong. You're wrong because you're thinking like prey. You've been hiding for so long that you've forgotten how to fight. We have not forgotten, one of the Remnants said sharply. We remember all too well. We remember the billions who died fighting. We remember the worlds turned to ash. We remember the price of resistance. And we will remember those who never gave up, Soman said quietly. She looked directly at the alien faces on the screen. I understand you're afraid. I understand you've lost everything. But humanity is going to fight. We're going to make the Valtrine regret coming to our space. And if we fall, we'll fall fighting. Not hiding, not running, fighting. The chamber was silent. Then slowly people began to nod. The vote was called. It was not unanimous. Many counselors voted to attempt evacuation or to try diplomatic solutions first. But the majority voted for Admiral Salmon's plan. Humanity would prepare for war. After the session ended, Salmon found herself in a quiet office with Dr. Yunho. The physicist was a thin man with wild hair and eyes that seemed to look at things no one else could see. He had been working on experimental weapons for the military research division. "Can we really do this?" Salmon asked him. "Can we fight something that's been unbeatable for 10,000 years?" Yunho smiled. "Admiral, I've been studying the Valtrine ships. Their shields, their weapons, their hull composition. They're impressive, but they're also old. They haven't innovated in centuries because they haven't needed to. And I have ideas. Crazy ideas. Ideas that might get me thrown out of the scientific community. But if they work," he pulled up schematics on his tablet. "What if we could disrupt their shields at the quantum level? What if we could make our ships invisible to their sensors? What if we could make weapons that learn and adapt faster than they can defend?" Salmon looked at the designs. They were radical, dangerous, possibly impossible. "How long would it take to build these?" 6 months if we dedicate every resource we have. Maybe less if we get lucky. Do it. I'll get you whatever you need." Meanwhile, back on the horizon's edge, Jiwan was making a discovery of her own. She had been analyzing Valtrine communication patterns intercepted during their surveillance. Most of it was encrypted military traffic that she couldn't decode, but she noticed something odd. "Dr. Minji, can you look at this?" she called out. Minji came over to her station. "What did you find?" "Watch this." Jiwan played back a series of Valtrine transmissions. "See how their fleet movements correspond with these communication bursts? There's a pattern, but it's weird. It's almost like they're following a program," Minji finished. "Their tactics are algorithmic." "Exactly. Which means if we can figure out the algorithm, we can predict what they'll do next." Minji stared at the data in amazement. "Jiwan, if you're right about this, you might have just given us a way to stay one step ahead of them." "There's more," Jiwan said excitedly. "I've been comparing their patterns to human combat doctrine. Ours is messier, less efficient, but also less predictable. We make mistakes, but we also make intuitive leaps that don't follow logic. Because we're not machines. We're creative." "Right. And creativity might be exactly what they can't defend against." The news spread quickly through human space. Within days, every colony, every station, every ship knew what was coming. Some people panicked. Some tried to flee, but most stayed and prepared to fight. Factories that had built civilian ships started building warships. Mining colonies began producing weapons. Scientists worked around the clock on new technologies. Soldiers trained for combat in zero gravity. Children learned emergency protocols in school. The remnants watched in amazement. They had expected humanity to scatter or surrender. Instead, humanity was transforming itself into a weapon. One of the remnants contacted Dr. Minji privately. "Why?" it asked simply. "Why fight when you know you will lose?" Minji thought about the question for a long time before answering. "Because if we don't fight, we're already lost. Because our children deserve a future. Because someone has to stand up and say no more. And maybe, just maybe, because we're too stupid to know when we're beaten." The alien made a sound that might have been laughter or crying. The shipyards above Mars had never been so busy. Hundreds of vessels were under construction simultaneously, and the night sky above the red planet glowed with welding torches and engine tests. Captain Deho walked through one of the construction bays, looking up at the massive warship taking shape above him. They were calling it the Vengeance. It was humanity's first true warship, built from scratch with one purpose: to kill Valtrine vessels. The ship was ugly and brutal, covered in weapons and armor plating. It looked nothing like the elegant exploration ships humanity had built before. "Beautiful, isn't she?" said a voice behind him. Daiho turned to see Commander Hyok approaching. His old friend had been promoted and assigned to be his second-in-command on the new vessel. "She looks like a flying fortress." "That's exactly what she is. The engineers say she can take a beating and keep fighting. Plus, she's equipped with Dr. Yunho's new quantum disruptors." Hyok handed Daiho a datapad. The weapons test results came back. When they work, they cut through Valtrine shields like they're not even there. When they work, the technology is new. Sometimes the weapons overload and explode. Sometimes they just don't fire at all. The scientists are calling it experimental. Daiho smiled grimly. "Everything we're doing is experimental. We're making this up as we go." Down on Earth, Dr. Yunho's laboratory looked like controlled chaos. Equipment covered every surface, and Holographic displays showed complex mathematical formulas floating in the air. Yunho himself hadn't slept in 3 days. He was running on coffee and desperation. "Show me the test results again," he demanded. His assistant, a young engineer named Nari, pulled up the data. The ghost drive worked perfectly in the last trial. The test ship was completely invisible to Valtrine sensor frequencies. They couldn't detect it at all. But Yunho could hear the hesitation in her voice. But it only works for 47 minutes before the system overheats. After that, the ship becomes visible again and needs 2 hours to cool down. Yunho rubbed his tired eyes. 47 minutes. That's not enough time for a sustained engagement. No, but it's enough time for a surprise attack. Nari was brilliant in her own right, and Yunho had learned to trust her instincts. If our ships can get close without being detected, they can fire first. In space combat, the first shot often decides the battle. You're right. Yunho made notes on his tablet. We'll need to design our tactics around that limitation. Hit fast, hit hard, then retreat before they can retaliate. Meanwhile, Admiral Soman was dealing with problems of her own. The United Earth government had approved her war plan, but implementing it was another matter entirely. She stood in a command center deep beneath Geneva, surrounded by screens showing military deployments across human space. "We have 62 warships completed or near completion," reported one of her officers. "Another 100 civilian vessels have been retrofitted with weapons and armor. It's not much compared to Valtrine numbers. It'll have to be enough," Soman said. "What about personnel?" "Every branch of the military has been mobilized. We've also accepted volunteers from the civilian population. Everyone over 18 has received basic combat training." The officer paused. "Admiral, we have more volunteers than we have ships for them." Salman felt a surge of pride. Humanity was scared, but they were not running. "Put the extra personnel to work on ground defenses. If the Valtrine make it past our fleet, they'll face a fight on every world they try to take." A new officer entered the room. This was Colonel Hajun, commander of Humanity's Special Forces. He was a short, muscular man with scars on his hands and a reputation for being absolutely fearless. "Admiral, the orbital strike teams are ready." All of them. Somin was surprised. The orbital strike teams were an experimental unit designed to board enemy ships in the middle of combat. The training was brutal, and she had expected high dropout rates. All 300 volunteers completed training. "We lost 12 during the exercises, but the rest are ready to go." Hajun's face was grim. "They know it's a suicide mission. They don't care." "Good. I want your teams distributed across our fastest ships. When we engage the Valtrine, you'll target their command vessels." Back on the horizon's edge, Dr. Minji had become humanity's unofficial ambassador to the remnants. She spent hours each day in communication with the scattered survivors of destroyed civilizations. Some were helpful, sharing tactical information and warnings. Others were bitter and wanted nothing to do with humanity's war. "You still don't understand what you're facing," said one of the remnants. This one called itself Vec and claimed to have been a military commander before its world fell. "The Valtrine don't just have superior numbers and technology. They have experience. They've been fighting for 10,000 years. Then help us," Minji urged. "You know how they think. You know their tactics. Give us every advantage you can." Vec was silent for a long moment. "Even if I help you, you will lose. The best you can hope for is to survive in hiding like we did. We're not built for hiding. Humans are fighters. Sometimes we fight even when we shouldn't. That's not courage. That's stupidity," Minji smiled. "Maybe. But it's our stupidity and we're proud of it." Despite its pessimism, Vec began sharing information. Detailed reports on Valtrine ship classifications, weapon capabilities, and tactical doctrine. Minji passed everything to Admiral Soman, who distributed it to every commander in the fleet. Jiwan had been promoted to tactical analyst. She spent her days studying the data, looking for patterns and weaknesses. One night, working late in her quarters, she made a breakthrough. "They're too efficient," she muttered to herself, staring at combat logs from previous Valtrine attacks. "They don't waste motion, don't take unnecessary risks, don't deviate from their optimal strategies." She ran simulations, pitting Valtrine tactics against human ones. In a straight fight, the Valtrine won every time. But when she introduced chaos into the simulations, random decisions, illogical moves, the results changed. Jiwan called Captain Daiho immediately. "Sir, I think I know how we can beat them. I'm listening. We can't fight them logically. Their algorithms are too good. But what if we fight them illogically? What if we make decisions that don't make tactical sense? Deho frowned. You want us to make bad decisions on purpose? Not bad. Unpredictable. The Valtrine optimize everything. They calculate the best response to every situation, but they can't calculate what we'll do if we're not optimizing. If we're just improvising. That sounds insane. It is insane. But the simulations show it works. Sort of. Sometimes. Deho laughed despite himself. Well, I guess insanity is better than certain defeat. Send your analysis to Admiral Soman. The months passed quickly. Human space transformed from a collection of peaceful colonies into an armed fortress. Every asteroid was surveyed for strategic value. Every ship was armed. Every citizen knew their role in the defense plan. Dr. Yunho successfully completed several more experimental weapons. The quantum disruptors were temperamental, but devastating when they worked. The Ghost Drive was installed on dozens of ships. He also developed something he called smart missiles that could learn from enemy defensive patterns and adapt their attack vectors in real time. Engineer Nari worked miracles, pushing manufacturing beyond what anyone thought possible. She designed new construction methods that could assemble ships in weeks instead of months. She created repair drones that could fix battle damage automatically. She slept 4 hours a night and never complained. Colonel Hajun trained his orbital strike teams relentlessly. They practiced boarding simulations until they could breach a ship and reach its command center in under 3 minutes. They learned to fight in zero gravity, in hard vacuum, in conditions that would kill most people in seconds. Admiral Soman coordinated everything, somehow keeping track of 1,000 different projects while maintaining the confidence of the government and the people. She gave speeches that inspired hope. She made hard decisions that saved resources even when people criticized her. She carried the weight of humanity's survival on her shoulders and never let anyone see her doubt. 1 month before the projected Valtrine arrival, Captain Deho took the Vengeance on its first real patrol. The ship performed beautifully, responding to commands with precision. The crew was green, most of them seeing their first combat posting, but they were eager and trained. How does she handle? Hyuk asked from his station. Like a dream, Deho admitted. A violent, heavily armed dream. Ji-Wan was at her tactical station monitoring long-range sensors. Captain, I'm picking up something. It's faint, but it matches the signatures we detected around the Thalian system. Everyone on the bridge tensed. How far? Deho asked. 3 light years. They're still distant, but they're coming. Deho activated the fleet-wide communication channel. All ships, this is Vengeance. Enemy forces detected. Repeat, enemy forces detected. All units move to defensive positions. This is not a drill. Across human space, alarms began to sound. Ships powered up their weapons. Soldiers reported to their stations. Families said goodbye to each other, not knowing if they'd meet again. On Earth, Admiral Soman stood in the command center and watched the tactical displays update. The Valtrine Third Fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of human space. War Master Kelthrin stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and surveyed the primitive defenses ahead. In his 300 years of service, he had conquered 47 star systems. This would be 48. Analysis, he commanded. His tactical officer studied the scanner readings. The inhabitants have approximately 60 warships and perhaps 100 armed civilian vessels. Primitive weapons, basic shield technology. Their formation suggests they will attempt a defensive stand at the 4th planet of their home system. How disappointing, Kelthrin said. I had hoped for at least a mild challenge. He had no way of knowing that every word he spoke was being intercepted and translated by Ji-Wan aboard the Horizon's edge. She listened to his arrogance and smiled, coldly. They think we're going to fight them head-on. She reported to Captain Deho. They're not expecting anything creative. Good, Deho replied. Let's keep it that way. The human fleet was positioned exactly where the Valtrine expected it, arranged in neat defensive formations around Mars. It looked like a textbook defensive strategy, the kind that appeared in military training manuals. It was also completely fake. The real human fleet was hidden in the asteroid belt, their ships using the Ghost Drive technology to remain invisible. Civilian vessels and automated drones had been left at Mars to create the illusion of a full defensive force. Admiral Soman watched from the command center as the Valtrine fleet advanced confidently toward Mars. Wait for it, she said calmly. Let them get closer. The Valtrine ships moved in perfect formation, their approach calculated for maximum efficiency. They had done this thousands of times before. It was routine. They're in range of the asteroid belt, reported the tactical officer. All ships, Soman commanded, execute Operation Hornet's Nest. In the asteroid field, the ghost drives deactivated simultaneously. 60 human warships appeared from nowhere, surrounding the Valtrine fleet on 3 sides. Before the enemy could react, the human ships opened fire. Dr. Yunho's quantum disruptors tore through Valtrine shields like paper. Smart missiles swarmed the enemy capital ships, adapting their attack patterns faster than the defensive systems could respond. Conventional weapons hammered at exposed hull sections. The Valtrine fleet reeled in shock. In 10,000 years, no one had surprised them. No one had struck first. The carefully maintained formations broke apart as ships tried to respond to threats from multiple directions. All ships, focus fire on their command vessels, Deho ordered. The Vengeance led the attack, its heavy weapons pounding the Eternal Dominion's shields. Aboard the Valtrine flagship, chaos erupted on the bridge. Warning lights flashed. Damage reports flooded in. War Master Kelthrin grabbed his tactical officer. How did they hide from our sensors? I don't know, sir. The technology is unknown to us. Then figure it out. Return fire. Establish defensive formations. But the Valtrine fleet was designed for overwhelming attacks against static defenses. They weren't prepared for enemy ships darting between asteroids, appearing and disappearing, attacking from impossible angles. The human ships fought like insects, stinging and retreating before they could be swatted. Colonel Hajun's strike teams launched from fast attack ships, using the chaos of battle as cover. They wore advanced combat armor that let them survive in hard vacuum. They carried weapons designed specifically to kill in the confined spaces of starships. Hajun's team breached a Valtrine cruiser through an exposed docking port. Inside, they encountered the alien crew. The Valtrine were large creatures, heavily armored with multiple limbs, but they had never fought boarding actions before. They didn't know how to defend their own ships. Move fast, stay together, Hajun commanded. His team flowed through the corridors like water, eliminating resistance and planting explosives on critical systems. Within minutes, they had sabotaged the ship's reactor and retreated to their transport. The Valtrine cruiser exploded in a brilliant flash of light. Hajun allowed himself a grim smile. Target acquired and neutralized. Moving to the next one. Jiwan coordinated the human attack from her position aboard the horizon's edge. She watched the battle unfold on her screens, tracking every ship movement, every weapons exchange. The Valtrine were trying to establish their standard tactical response, but the humans kept changing their approach. They're adapting, she warned Admiral Soman. They'll figure out our pattern soon. Then we change the pattern. Soman replied. Signal all ships. Break formation. Individual captains are free to engage at their discretion. The order went against every principle of coordinated warfare, but that was exactly the point. The human ships scattered, each captain fighting their own individual battle. Some used the ghost drive to vanish and reappear elsewhere. Others formed temporary partnerships with nearby vessels. Some made kamikaze runs at damaged enemy ships. It was chaos. It was madness. It was completely unpredictable. The Valtrine tactical computers tried to calculate optimal responses but failed. Every time they predicted a human action, the humans did something different. It was as if the enemy had no strategy at all, just random violence and improvisation. War Master Kelthrin had never been so frustrated. They're fighting like barbarians. No discipline, no coordination, no logical tactics. His tactical officer looked pale. Sir, we've lost 12 capital ships and 30 cruisers. The enemy has only lost 8 warships, 12 ships. Kelthrin had never lost 12 ships in a single engagement in his entire career. All vessels focus fire on the enemy flagship. If we destroy their command structure, the chaos will worsen and they'll be easier to eliminate. The Valtrine fleet concentrated its fire on the Vengeance. Hundreds of weapons struck the ship simultaneously. Shields failed. Armor plating melted. The ship shuddered under the assault. Hull breach on deck 7 through 12, Hyok reported as alarm screamed. Engine power down to 40%. Weapon systems offline. Deho gripped his chair. Activate emergency thrusters. Get us out of their firing solution. But before the Vengeance could retreat, A dozen human ships moved to intercept. They placed themselves between the flagship and the Valtrine fleet, using their own hulls as shields. They bought the Vengeance time to escape, sacrificing themselves in the process. Deho watched as the rescue ships were torn apart. He didn't know the names of all their captains. He didn't know if they had families waiting for them. All he knew was they had died to save his ship and crew. "Sir, we're clear," Hyok said quietly. "Take us back to the asteroid field. Emergency repairs." Deho's voice was rough. "And someone get me a damage report on those ships that saved us." "I want to know their names." The battle raged for 6 more hours. It was brutal. Close-quarters combat unlike anything the Valtrine had ever experienced. Human ships used ramming attacks when their weapons failed. Pilots ejected at the last moment, leaving their ships to crash into enemy vessels on autopilot. Engineers repaired battle damage while under fire, sometimes working in sections of the ship that were exposed to vacuum. When the Valtrine finally retreated, they had lost 43 ships. The humans had lost 28 warships and lost or damaged many civilian vessels. By any measure, it was a bloody battle. But it was also something unprecedented. The Valtrine had lost. Aboard the Eternal Dominion, War Master Kelthrin stared at the battle reports in disbelief. "This is impossible. These primitives should have been eliminated in hours. Sir, I recommend we call for reinforcements before engaging again." Kelthrin wanted to refuse. To admit he needed help would be a humiliation. But pride was a luxury he couldn't afford. "Contact the 7th Fleet, tell them we require assistance. And tell them," he paused, hating the words, "tell them the humans are dangerous." Back in human space, the victory was bittersweet. Admiral Soman read casualty reports and felt the weight of every name. Over 3,000 people had died in the battle. 3,000 families would receive terrible news. 3,000 empty chairs at dinner tables, but they had won. Against impossible odds, humanity had faced the Valtrine and forced them to retreat. "It's not over," she told her staff. "This was just their scouting force. They'll come back with more ships and they'll be ready for our tactics." "Then we'll come up with new tactics," said one of her officers. Soman smiled tiredly. "Exactly." Dr. Minji received messages from the remnants. They were shocked. Some didn't believe the reports. Others were cautiously hopeful for the first time in years. Vec's message was simple. "You actually did it. You survived." "We did more than survive," Minji replied. "We hurt them. They will come back. With everything they have, let them come. We'll be ready." On the Vengeance, Captain Deho gathered his crew. They looked exhausted and traumatized. Some had lost friends in the battle. All of them had faced death and survived. "I know you're tired," Deho said. "I know you're scared. I know some of you are wondering if we can do this again. The answer is yes. We can and we will. Because we're not fighting for glory or conquest. We're fighting for survival, for our families, for our future. And as long as we have breath in our bodies, we will fight." The crew stood straighter. They had faced the nightmare and lived. They could do it again. But deep in space, the Valtrine 7th Fleet was already moving toward human territory. 3 weeks after the first battle, Agent Kyung-soo stood in a briefing room aboard a captured Valtrine cruiser. He was a quiet man with sharp eyes and scars that told stories he never shared. He had spent 15 years in Earth's intelligence division, doing work that would never appear in history books. "This is insane," Dr. Minji said, studying the mission parameters. "You want to infiltrate their fortress world?" "Not want," Kyung-soo replied. "Need." Admiral Soman believes the Valtrine have a strategic database on their command world. Ship movements, supply routes, defensive installations. If we can steal it, we can hit them where it hurts. And if you're caught, then I'll die. But the mission will have been worth attempting. Minji looked at the small team Kyung-soo had assembled. Engineer Nari was there, looking nervous but determined. 2 other operatives she didn't recognize completed the group. "I'm coming with you. You're a scientist, not a soldier. I'm a xenobiologist. I know Valtrine physiology better than anyone. If you encounter their security forces, you'll need that knowledge." Kyung-soo studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Fine, but you follow my orders exactly." The infiltration team used a captured Valtrine shuttle, its identification code stolen from the cruiser's database. They approached the fortress world of Valtros Prime, disguised as a supply transport. It was a bold lie, and it shouldn't have worked, but the Valtrine had never faced espionage before. Their security was designed to repel military attacks, not infiltrators. The shuttle landed without incident. Valtros Prime was a massive installation built into an asteroid. Thousands of Valtrine military personnel worked there, coordinating fleets across dozens of sectors. It was the heart of their war machine. Kyung-soo led the team through access tunnels, moving silently through areas marked on the stolen maps. They wore stolen uniforms and moved with confidence. The key to infiltration wasn't invisibility, it was belonging. They reached the data archives without incident. Nari connected her equipment to the alien systems, her fingers flying over unfamiliar interfaces. "This is incredible," she whispered. "Their entire strategic database is here. Fleet positions, resource allocations, everything. How long to copy it?" Kyung-soo asked. 20 minutes. You have 10. While Nari worked, Dr. Minji examined the data streaming across the screens. What she saw made her blood run cold. "Kyung-soo, you need to see this." The intelligence agent looked at the information Minji was highlighting. It was a detailed analysis of the Valtrine Empire's resource situation. They were failing. Their population had grown beyond their ability to sustain it. They had strip-mined their own territories to exhaustion. They needed to conquer and consume or they would collapse. "They're not evil," Minji said quietly. "They're desperate. Their entire civilization is starving. Does that change anything?" Kyung-soo asked. "No, but it explains everything." Nari finished the download ahead of schedule. "Got it, full database copied. Then we leave now." But as they turned to go, alarms began to sound. The Valtrine had detected the intrusion. Doors sealed automatically. Security forces mobilized throughout the facility. "We're trapped," one of the operatives said. Kyung-soo pulled out a small explosive device. "Not yet." "Nari, can you overload their power systems?" The engineer looked at the controls, thinking fast. "Yes, but it'll cause a cascade failure. This entire section of the facility will lose life support and gravity." "Do it." Nari's hands moved across the controls. Warning lights flashed red. The station's power grid began to fluctuate wildly. 30 seconds until overload. The team ran through the corridors as gravity began to fail. They pushed off walls, swimming through the air toward the landing bay. Behind them, they could hear the Valtrine security forces giving chase. They reached the shuttle just as the power failed completely. The hangar bay went dark. Air began venting into space through emergency pressure releases. Kyung-soo fired up the engines and launched before the bay doors could seal, but they weren't going to make it. Valtrine fighters were already scrambling to intercept them. The shuttle had no weapons, no armor. They were dead in space. "Give me the controls," Nari said suddenly. "What?" "Trust me. Give me the controls." Kyung-soo handed over the pilot station. Nari's fingers danced over the console. "I installed a ghost drive prototype in this shuttle. It's never been tested at this range, but theoretically it should work." "Theoretically? Better than definitely being caught." She activated the device. The shuttle vanished from Valtrine sensors. The fighters flew past them, searching for a target that had disappeared. Nari guided the ship away from Valtros Prime, the engines running on minimal power to avoid detection. "It's working," she breathed. "It's actually working." But the device was overheating faster than predicted. Warning lights flashed across the console. "We have maybe 5 minutes before this thing melts down." "That's enough," Kyung-soo said. "Get us to the rendezvous point." They made it, barely. The ghost drive failed just as they reached the human recovery ship. Nari had saved them all, but at a cost. The explosion had damaged the shuttle's life support. They transferred to the recovery ship with only minutes of air remaining. "You did good," Kyung-soo told Nari as medical teams checked them over. The engineer was too exhausted to reply. She just nodded and closed her eyes. While Kyung-soo's team was infiltrating Valtros Prime, the Valtrine 7th Fleet arrived at Earth. Over 100 capital ships, supported by thousands of smaller vessels. It was the largest military force the Valtrine had assembled in centuries. War Master Kelthrin led the assault personally, determined to erase his previous humiliation. "No mercy," he commanded. "Destroy everything." Admiral Soman stood in the command center watching the massive enemy fleet approach. She had prepared for this moment, but the reality was overwhelming. "All defensive positions report status. Every ship, every station, every planetary battery reported ready." Humanity was as prepared as it could be, but everyone knew it might not be enough. They outnumber us 5-1, her tactical officer said. Then we'll have to be 5 times smarter. Soman activated the fleet-wide communication channel. This is it. This is where we make our stand. Not for territory, not for resources, but for the simple right to exist. Show them that humanity does not surrender. Show them that some species fight back. All ships engage at will. The battle that followed would be remembered for centuries. The human fleet used every trick they had learned. Ships appeared and disappeared using ghost drives. Smart missiles overwhelmed point defense systems. Boarding teams struck at command vessels. Captain Deho led the Vengeance in attacks that seemed suicidal but somehow succeeded. But the Valtrine had learned too. They adapted their formations. They deployed new countermeasures. They fought with the cold efficiency of 10,000 years of warfare. Ships burned on both sides. The space around Earth filled with debris and bodies. G1 coordinated the defensive efforts, her predictions getting more accurate as the battle progressed. She could almost feel what the enemy would do next. Colonel Hajun's strike team boarded the Eternal Dominion itself. They fought through corridors filled with enemy soldiers, leaving a trail of bodies behind them. Hajun personally killed 12 Valtrine guards before reaching the command bridge. War Master Kelthrin faced him there, armed with a massive energy weapon. "You dare board my vessel?" "We dare more than that," Hajun replied, firing his weapon. The two warriors fought hand-to-hand, human against alien, while the battle raged around them. Hajun was smaller and weaker but faster and more desperate. He dodged the War Master's attacks and struck at weak points in the alien's armor. Finally, with a lucky shot, Hajun's weapon found its mark. War Master Kelthrin fell, his blood staining the deck. "How?" he gasped. "How can you primitive creatures defeat us?" "Because we refuse to lose," Hajun said. Then he activated the explosives his team had planted and ran. The Eternal Dominion exploded, taking dozens of nearby ships with it. The Valtrine fleet fell into chaos without their commander. Ships began to retreat, their formations breaking apart. But the victory came at a terrible cost. The human fleet was shattered. Only 32 warships remained operational. Earth's orbital defenses were destroyed. The moon colony had been bombarded. Millions were dead. In the command center, Admiral Soman received the report from Kyung-Soo's team. They had successfully stolen the Valtrine strategic database. She immediately broadcast it across the galaxy, sending it to every species the remnants could contact. The information spread like wildfire. Across 50 star systems, species that had hidden for generations saw the truth. The Valtrine Empire was vulnerable. Their supply lines were overextended. Their resources were depleted. And humanity had proven they could be beaten. Rebellions erupted throughout Valtrine territory. The remnants stopped hiding and started fighting. Supply convoys were attacked. Outposts were destroyed. The empire that had ruled for 10,000 years began to crumble. The Valtrine High Council convened an emergency session. They reviewed the disaster at Earth. They saw their empire burning. One counselor demanded immediate retaliation, a total assault that would exterminate humanity completely. But another voice spoke up, older and wiser. "We have lost more in these battles than in the previous 1,000 years combined. The humans have inspired rebellion across dozens of systems.